Let's go ahead and turn our attention to using the formal way for finding out the solution or the Nash equilibrium in these simultaneous move games. And the formal way we define this is something called a best response analysis or the best response technique. And this is a technique where every single player is going to select the best response to every possible move by the other player. So you're going to want to go ahead and put yourself into player 1 shoes, player 2 shoes, and then based on what you think the other player is going to choose, you're going to choose the best strategy. So the best response analysis or the best response technique. And the outcome that is selected as the best response by all players is the true solution or the Nash equilibrium. So the Nash equilibrium, just a really fancy way of saying what the true solution is in any of these game theory games. So let's go ahead and focus in on the simultaneous move game, give you an example, and use this best response technique to showcase exactly how we get the Nash equilibrium. So this is a table that's provided to you on the slides. I also drew this up on the sort of notation right here, just so we can draw on it a little bit more. So same numbers, and we have the same 5 components as we did before. So 2 players, player number 1, player number 2. They have the information, that's perfect information. Player 1 and player 2 know exactly what's happening in this game. Each of these players have 2 strategies, strategy 1, strategy 2, and we have the outcomes and payoffs, 4 outcomes and the payoffs attached to each one of these outcomes. Remember that player number 1 always starts on the left-hand side. These are his or her particular strategies, and the first numbers are going to correspond to player number 1. So 5, 6, 8, and 10. And player number 2, always going to be on top right here. Strategies 1 and 2, it's going to read vertically in this instance, and the second numbers are for player number 2, the 9, 15, 5, and 12. So how exactly do we use the best response technique in order to find the Nash equilibrium? So like I said before, put yourself into player number 1's shoes first. So the only things that you can choose are strategy 1 and strategy 2. But you want to choose the best strategy given player 2's choices. So what if you knew for sure player number 2 was always going to choose strategy number 1? So you knew for sure player 2 was always going to play strategy number 1. So if you want, go ahead and cover up the right-hand side of this table right here with your hand, so you only see strategy number 1. So with this being the case, if you were player number 1 and you knew that player number 2 was going to play strategy 1, what would be the best thing for you to do? Would you play strategy 1 or would you play strategy 2? You would want to go ahead and play strategy number 2 because you're comparing 8 versus 5. If you knew for sure player number 2 was going to be playing strategy number 1, if you played strategy number 1 as well, you'd only get a payoff equal to 5. If you played strategy 2, however, you get a payoff equal to 8, and you always want higher numbers with the payoffs right here. So here, you say, I choose strategy 2, and you want to go ahead and put a little underline here just to go ahead and mark it. You can underline it, you can circle it, do whatever you want. You just want to go ahead and highlight that this would be your choice. Then you want to go ahead and do the same thing for strategy number 2. What if you knew for sure player number 2 was going to be playing strategy number 2? Now cover up the left-hand side of the table with your hand, and now you only can see strategy number 2 on the sort of left on the table. And once again, what would be the best thing for you to do as player number 1? Choose strategy 1 that gives you a payoff of 6, or choose strategy 2 which gives you a payoff of 10. And once again, 10 is bigger than 6, so you would want to go ahead and play strategy number 2. So in both of these instances, no matter what player number 2 chooses, you as player number 1 are going to choose strategy 2. Then you want to go ahead and do the same exact thing, but now put yourselves in player number 2's shoes. If you knew for sure that player number 1 was going to be choosing strategy number 1, so go ahead and cover up the bottom half of this table with your hand, so only strategy number 1 for player number 1 is showing, what would be the best thing for you to do as player number 2? Choose strategy 1, which gives you a payoff of 9, or choose strategy number 2, which gives you a payoff of 15. Remember, second numbers goes towards player number 2, and you want to go ahead and choose 15 because 15 is bigger than 9. Finally, you want to go ahead and see the final strategy right here. What happens if you know for sure player number 1 is going to choose strategy number 2 all the time? What will be the best thing for you to do as player number 2? You would want to go ahead and choose strategy 2 once again, because if you chose strategy number 1, that only give you a payoff of 5. So 12 bigger than 5, you would choose strategy 2. And if you've done this correctly, you're going to notice something unusual. You're going to notice that in one of these boxes, in one of these outcome boxes, you're going to have 2 underlined marks. And the place where you have 2 underlined marks is exactly what we denote as our Nash equilibrium. This is our optimum strategy for both of these players. So if we wanted the full sort of outcome, or the full amount of strategies for this Nash equilibrium, it's going to say that player one is going to choose strategy two, because that's exactly how we come to this box right here. Player two also chooses strategy two, because hey, this is the best that he's going to do. That leads us to this outcome right here, and it's going to give us a payoff of 10, 12 for a payoff of 10, 12. So remember, first number goes for player number one. He gets a payoff of 10. Player number two gets a payoff of 12, that second number. So essentially, this is using the best response technique in order to solve out what the Nash equilibrium is going to be. And if we wanted a formal idea of what the Nash equilibrium is, we'll go ahead and build this up formally. So the next few slides right here as we work through this problem is exactly detailing what we did. We're highlighting exactly what the best response is, putting ourselves in each player's shoes and choosing the best strategy when we know for sure if the player is going to be choosing strategy one or strategy number two. And the place where we actually have these two highlights or the two underlines, that is our Nash equilibrium. So formally, what is our Nash equilibrium? It occurs when all players in a game use an optimum strategy in response to all other player strategies. Once a Nash equilibrium is achieved, no individual player can do better by changing his or her mind unilaterally. If this player actually decided to deviate from this plan or change their strategy, they would actually end up getting a lower payoff. So no player can do better if we are at a Nash equilibrium. And the Nash equilibrium is going to maximize the expected payoff given all possible scenarios. So go ahead and take a look at this example once again. This player number one choosing strategy two and player number two choosing strategy two as well is a Nash equilibrium. Because can player number one do any better? And the answer is no, because if player number one actually changed his strategy to strategy one, he'd only end up getting 6, and that's less than 10, so therefore he would not do better. Same thing for player number two. Can player number two do any better by changing his or her strategy? If player number two changed to strategy number one, that means he'd only get 5, which is less than 12, so therefore we cannot do better. Any of these players cannot do better by changing his or her strategy, so therefore this box right here, this outcome, is our Nash equilibrium. No player can deviate or unilaterally change his mind in order to do better. So therefore what we see right here is our Nash equilibrium. We'll do a few more examples using this best response technique to introduce a few more concepts. So if you need a little bit more practice, just go ahead, take a look at our next video and see exactly how we are going to build another example.